Friends, so good to see you. I'm having a great time with you so far, I have to tell you. Could all change, but so far. As we were just singing, the image that struck me as to how it feels to be with you was almost as if I'm engaged and I'm meeting my fiance's family. This is the image that came to me. And I'm a little nervous about it, and then I find this great extended family that are really cool and warm and inviting. And that's kind of what it's felt like for me here, being with you over just these last 24 hours or 36 hours so far. So I really have sensed that God has been moving in our time here, and I'm not 100% sure what the thread is yet, but I sense that God's pulling a thread, a thematic thread through our time. And as such, I sensed that I was supposed to completely chuck what I had planned for this morning and go in a different direction. So that's what we're going to do. I want to start by asking you this question. How many of you, be honest now, how many of you are afraid, at least a little bit, afraid of heights? A lot. Look at that. That's awesome. Okay? And how many of you totally love high places? Okay? And then there must be some people who just don't like voting or don't really care. I kind of have what I guess would say a love-hate relationship with high places. There's part of me that is often very much afraid of being in a high place. I get very nervous. I think it was last summer or maybe 2 summers ago, my family was on holiday and we went to a beautiful canyon called Bryce Canyon in Utah. And my wife and my 2 kids got right up by the edge of this canyon. Like they crawled out on their hands and their knees and looked over the edge of this cliff that was huge cliff. And I was standing, about 10 feet back, completely freaked out, saying, "No, careful that you don't fall." And I was genuinely nervous that one of them was going to slip off the edge. But I wouldn't go up by the edge. I think that if I stood by the edge, I'm not sure I trust myself. Like, I think that I might just see if I could fly or something like that. But on the other hand, I'm kind of a collector of experiences, and sometimes that's like adrenaline experiences. So I've jumped out of planes 3 times with somebody else strapped on my back who knew what they were doing, and I bungee jumped in a couple pretty extreme places. I'd like to show you some pictures of that if I could. So the first picture is the first place that I bungee jumped. Anybody know where that is? Yes, Victoria Falls. It's on the border of Zimbabwe and Zambia, and that is the Zambezi River, and I'm taking that picture from Vic Falls, and that's the Livingston Bridge. And if you look carefully, you can see right in the top middle of the bridge, there's a little tiny hut, and that's the bungee hut. And so this is what happens when you bungee jump at this spot. By the way, this place was in the news about 6 months ago because somebody jumped and the bungee cord snapped and they fell into the river. And they had some injuries, but they lived, okay? Yeah. So encourage you to go there. It is funny thinking back in hindsight, the bungee cord that they used with me was like super frayed. It had like rubber bandy things sticking out all over the place. So anyhow, I jumped there twice in one day. And the first time, they put a bath towel around my ankles, and then they strapped some strapping around it, and then they hooked up like a carabiner and a cord to a bungee on the back of my ankles. And at the edge of that bungee hut is a little tiny square of almost like a little mini diving board sticking off the edge, but it's not springy. And you stand out on that little tiny square over the river, which is, by the way, 300 feet below. It's 100 meters high, 104 meters high, I think. And so I'm standing up there on the edge of this little tiny square, and there's a bungee master. That's his job title, which is really the cool. You guys need some bungee masters, I think. Yeah, in the national office. So the bungee master is standing next to me, and he counts down, and he says, I'm going to count down from 5, and when I get to 0, you jump. All right, and then he said, are you ready? And he said, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bungee. He doesn't actually say jump, he says bungee. It's very cute. And then I dove face first down and bounced up and all of that, right? Then later in the afternoon, I came back because they give you a discount on your second jump, so it seemed like such a good value. And the second time I jumped, I did the other way that they offered, which was with a chest-mounted bungee cord, kind of this alien thing springing out of my chest. And they hooked it on here. And the freaky thing about this was that I actually had to stand backwards with my toes on the edge of that platform and my heels off the edge, and then jump backwards. Now, I wasn't face down this time, but jumping backwards was way freakier than diving forwards. And this time, to add a little edge to it, the bungee master, it was a different guy this time, he was standing there and he had these like blade sunglasses on, you know, the kind that like new wavers would wear back in I think I had a pair back in about the late 80s or something. And he had these blade sunglasses on and he was standing right in my face, right here. And he gave me the instructions again. I'm going to count down from 5. When I get to bungee, I want you to just jump backwards, arch your back and jump backwards. And he started counting 5, 4, 3, and at about 3, he was this far from my face, he lifted his glasses, and he had one eye that was coming straight at me, and one eye that was pointing up over here somewhere, and I think I almost just fell off. The next picture is me falling backwards down towards the river there. Yes, wearing a lovely Hawaiian shirt that day, because I was, after all, a tourist from America. Okay. Now, the second time that I bungee jumped, next picture, anybody know where this is? No? New Zealand, Queenstown. Yeah, the birthplace of bungee. And there's about 7 different places to bungee jump in Queenstown, New Zealand. And I was there speaking at some youth events, and I had an opportunity to bring my family with me, which was a real treat. And so my daughter and I, she was, I think, 13 or 14 at the time, she and I both bungee jumped off of this place, which was high on a mountainside on the edge of Queenstown. And there was this kind of long metal arm sticking out of the mountainside, and you took a long gondola ride up the mountain, and then they weighed you and did all of this other stuff, right? And then you walked out on this metal arm out into the bungee hut at the end of the metal arm. And on this one, it was a little bit similar, but there was a difference in that I didn't stand by the edge. They had me stand back in the bungee hut, and they attached, again, this time it was kind of a harness but on my chest, but the bungee came out of the middle of my back this time. And I was standing probably 20 feet back inside the bungee hut, and the guy was standing up on the edge holding the cord. And he said a similar thing. He said, I'm going to count down from 10, and when I get down to 5, I want you to be off the edge. If you don't jump, I will keep counting, but when I get to 0, I will stand in front of you. There was actually a gate. I will close the gate or remove the cord. You won't have another chance, and you won't get your money back. I was paying attention, and it was expensive. I was paying attention and nodding and trying to look very calm, and I'm ready for this adventure. Inside, I'm terrified, right? And I was expecting him to say at that point, are you ready? Do you have any questions? But instead, as soon as he said, you won't get your money back, he started counting. And he started counting fast. 10, 9, 8, like that. And I was like, I can't even run fast enough to get off by 5. And so I didn't want to lose my money. That's what seriously motivated me. So I started just sprinting toward the edge. You will not take my money. And I dove off the edge, and that's what this next picture is, me launching right there. Yeah. That was a funny laugh right there. I'll just assume you're laughing at the image rather than my gracefulness. Back up for just a second to the last picture. By the way, that's me on the right edge there of the bungee hut, kind of leaning out. I want to show you this because for me, this is burned into my head as such a helpful image of the difference between belief and faith. And I think that as I hear so much more about your work, I came in with some understanding and some assumptions, some history with you guys. I spoke at this conference 15 years ago. And maybe there was 2 or 3 of you who were here that day. I see that your work clearly takes belief, but more than that, takes all kinds of faith. And as I've talked to some of you, I understand that the pressures that you're under and the stress of fundraising and people who maybe disagree with your approaches, or people who don't understand or misunderstand, or working with kids who are often 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back. All of these things, it just calls on us to be people of faith, which is what we were made to be. But it's this internal tension. How can I be a person who lives by faith every step, every day? That is a picture of belief right there, not faith. I had all kinds of belief at that moment. I believed that it was going to be worth the money I was paying for it. I believed that that weird giant metal arm sticking out of the side of the mountain was going to hold me up, and it wasn't just going to collapse on me. I believed that the people who weighed me and chose the correct bungee cord for me, it was one of their thicker ones, knew what they were doing. I believed that the guys who attached the little carabiners did it correctly. I believed that I would fly gracefully off the edge of this thing. I would soar down toward the mountainside, but instead of splatting into the side of it, I would bounce jauntily back toward the heavens, and that the whole thing would be a fun experience, an adrenaline rush, and a story to tell. I believed all of that, but there was no action involved. I mean, you could say there was action in positioning myself, but it would have been very easy for me to back out at that point. But this next picture, that right there, that's a picture of faith. That's when my belief became faith, when it got put into action. Faith is all about action. It's about stepping out. Belief is good, but it's not the same thing as faith. I think we have to have belief in order to move out in faith, but God has designed us, God built us, God invented us in perfect love to be people of faith. And I firmly believe it's what is really needed for many of you as you recharge this week, is more faith. So then the question becomes, you can take that down now. Then the question becomes, so how do I get more faith? For so many things in our lives, in our world, we just assume that if I need to have something more of it, then I need to take it, or I need to make myself have it. And so we try to bear down, I will have more faith. And that motion, that only works for one thing, and it's not getting more faith. Maybe 2 things, childbirth and pooping. I think one of my favorite little verses in the Bible is a word picture from God to us about how we get more faith. Faith is a gift from God. And so the question is, how do we get it? How do we get this gift of faith so that we can live the way that we were made to live, putting our beliefs into action? And this verse is a strange verse. It's probably one that many of you have not heard before, even though you're people of the Word. It's a strange little verse from the book of Deuteronomy. We're only going to do our Bible study this morning on one little verse because it's so rich. It's so rich. And so this is the verse. It's Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 11. Deuteronomy 32:11. It's a pretty little poetic verse. Pastoral sounding almost, sounds almost like a greeting card, a Christian greeting card. It says this, Deuteronomy 32:11, like an eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, that spreads its wings to catch them and carries them on its pinions. I'm going to read it again because that's the whole thing. Ready? like an eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, that spreads its wings to catch them and carries them on its pinions. Now, this is a word picture, a metaphorical language that God has given us to show us our role and God's role in getting more faith. And in this word picture, as we unpack it a little bit, constantly remember, God is the mother eagle, and you and I are the baby eagles, referred to by ornithologists, bird people, as eaglets. Turn to the person next to you and say, I'm an eaglet. Yes, you are. Okay? So hold on to that. Remember, don't try to put yourself in God's place in this story. You're not the mother eagle, you're the eaglet. Okay? Now, do you guys have eagles? Are there eagles? Yeah? Sorry, I don't know. Of course, we Americans always believe that we're the center of everything, so we think we're the only ones who have eagles and everything. Eagles, I don't know if you've ever seen an eagle nest, but if you've ever seen any kind of a standard issue bowl-shaped bird nest, then you at least have an idea of what an eagle's nest would be like. Because like a standard issue bowl-shaped bird's nest, an eagle's nest is shaped similarly, but is massive. They're like 10 or 12 feet in diameter. They're really, really large, but still kind of a general bowl-shaped thing made out of sticks and twigs. But instead of little tiny blades of grass and twigs, instead they're bigger sticks. Okay? So picture this big giant bowl made out of sticks. And mother eagles love to build their nest in extremely high places. The tops of extremely tall trees or the sides like a crag in the side of a mountaintop or something like that, primarily to keep their babies away from predators. And so they build their nests in these extremely high places. Now, imagine the moment that the eaglet is hatched out of the egg. It's born into this little world. They don't know about the bigger world. All they know is the inside of this little stick room that they're in. Mom eagle, by the way, does something really, really fascinating after she builds her nest, before her babies are born. She lines the inside of the nest with her own down feathers. The sticks are rough and large and pokey, and so she plucks out her own down feathers from her own belly, the softest feathers she has, and it's some pain, I'm sure, and she lines the inside of the nest, so it's almost like she has a duvet or a down parka or something like that to keep nice and warm and cozy on the inside of the nest. So the baby eaglet, it's hatched from its egg, and it's inside this. It's down below the edge of the nest, and it's inside this safe and beautiful and warm and cozy little space. And it's got this perfect little down duvet to wrap itself in. And Mom brings worms and chews them up for me. So my life is just wonderful, and all of my needs are being provided for. Listen, as we walk through this word picture, I want you to pay close attention, reflectively, prayerfully, as to where you are at right now in the process of growing your faith. And some of you in this room are in that spot right now. You're in the nest. Don't be apologetic. Do not be apologetic about that. I remember so many times, and maybe you've had this experience, when I heard a Christian speaker in front of a group of teenagers who shared his testimony. I remember one in particular, his testimony of all the bad choices he'd made in his life and all the drugs and all the sex and how God saved him from that. And in my mind's eye, I'm thinking, half the kids in the room right now are thinking, man, you turned out to be a Christian speaker. I only want to do half the drugs and sex that you did, and maybe I'll turn out okay. Right? So many times we think that we have to be in this place of torture and things that are all messed up in order for God to really work in our lives. No, if you're in the nest, if you're in a place where God's really providing for all of your needs and you don't have a lot of problems or conflict, you're not in a place of turmoil, that is a wonderful and blessed place to be. And thank God for that. Maybe you're younger and your faith hasn't been very challenged yet, or you haven't been confronted yet by some significant problems or even your own weakness or brokenness. Maybe that's why, but I often find that even at my ripe old age, I find myself back in the nest. And I find, oh, thank you, Jesus. This is a good place to rest for a while. But if we're made to be eagles, not just eaglets, at some point we've got to get out of the nest, right? They can't stay there their whole lives. And the first thing that the mom eagle does is really interesting. It's the first line, isn't it the first line? Yes, the first line of the verse. Like the eagle that stirs up its nest. When she's ready for her babies to learn how to fly, the mom eagle reaches down through the down feathers with her talons, and she pulls up some of the sticks from the bottom of the nest. That's what stirring the nest means. It's messing it up. And so suddenly, this cozy, warm, comfortable, easy place of being for the eaglets has giant daggers sticking up on the bottom of it. And they're getting poked in the butt, and there's no place to go except out toward the edge of the nest. And so instead of being in the center in this safe and warm place, they're now being prepared for something to come. They're moving out toward the edge. And even, I'm guessing, as they move out toward the edge, they're starting to see beyond the edge of the nest, that there's more to this world, that there's more, that there's stuff out there. I imagine, even when I think of it from a developmental standpoint in the lives of teenagers, that taking them to the edge like that has a combination of excitement and fear. Maybe some of you are in that place. I'm sure. I'm quite confident that there's a percentage of you here this morning who are at the edge of the nest in your faith development at this point in time. That you feel that God is preparing you for some kind of change, even if you're not clear what the change is yet. That you sense that God is moving you out, preparing you internally or circumstantially for something that is about to change, something new. And maybe you even have that combination of excitement and fear because there's unknown involved. You're seeing over the edge of the nest, and so now you see possibilities. And you see that the world is bigger than you previously understood it to be. That there's new potentials and maybe even new threats that are just on the other side of this nest wall. If you're in that place, that can be really exciting. It can also be something that just brings you to a freeze, to a place of thinking, I don't know how to ever move forward in this. It's really, as is so often true, I think, in the Christian life, it's an attitude of saying, I'm willing, God, move me forward. Take me on the next step. Here's the next step. And this step is, if I want to get scientific for a second, this step is a little bit contested, that some bird people suggest that they haven't really witnessed this exact behavior in modern eagles. This is absolutely the midrash, the interpretation of the rabbis to the people of what this passage was talking about. What happens next is that the mom eagle takes one of the baby eagles and she somehow plops it onto her back. She grabs one of them, beak or talon, I don't know what, she gets it right back on here. The Bible talks about her catching them on her pinions. The pinions on a bird are like our shoulder blades right here. Okay? If you've ever seen a bird skeleton, you see the spine, and then you see the wings coming out like upside down V's, like this, and the place where the wings are attached to the spine, those are the pinions. And so that's the carrying point. That's where she holds them, is on her pinions. And she takes one of her babies soaring into the sky. And it's not flying yet, it's riding. Right? It's soaring through the sky and seeing, can you imagine this for a baby eaglet who's never once been out of the nest? It's never seen much more than this intimate, tiny little world. And now it's seeing this incredible, spacious panorama, unending vista of possibility and beauty. And baby Eaglet is up there on mom's back, just thinking, this is incredible. I mean, look at this. I feel like I can see forever. I have a whole new understanding of the world. I'm excited, and I see that everything's so beautiful, and there's so much possibility and potential. And my vision is clear, and I can see forever. Look at the mountains, and look at the hills, and the trees, and the sunset over there, and oh, this is incredible. Mom, I'm flying. And she's like, no, you're riding. Some of you very much this week are in that spot, especially because of the wonderful times of being together with family and intensive worship and support that you're experiencing here. And some of you very much feel like you're in that spot where you have this intimacy with God. You're holding on to God's back, right? This intimacy with God, and you're soaring through the sky, and you have all new vision. You have a sense of purpose, and you feel like you understand things in a new way. Maybe you're understanding the ministry in front of you in a new way, or maybe you're understanding your own relationship with God in a new way, or some other aspect of your world or your life, but you're seeing things new, and you're full of vision and excitement and potential. That's a fantastic place to be. And if you're in that spot this morning, rejoice, rejoice, rejoice. Remember, you're still not flying. God's the one providing, but God is providing you with this incredible experience to grow your faith. The next step in the process is the hard one. It's necessary, though, for us to stretch and grow, and in God's great providence and love for us to become the people that He designed us to be. In this room, the leaders that He designed us to be also. This is what the mom does. Here's baby right here. Well, let's do it this way. Here's mom. Here's baby, okay? And mom is soaring very, very high in the sky. She flies about as high as she ever does at this moment. And baby's up here riding along. And then mom does this. She does a barrel roll. And baby starts to fall. It has no idea that it even has wings, let alone how to use them. It is doing a completely out of control, end over end plummet toward the earth, toward a absolutely, undeniably, unavoidably painful and deadly ending. And it has no ability, this is so key, no ability to save itself. No ability, no chance of saving itself. Completely out of control, falling end over end. Some of you, you're in this spot, and it's hard. If you've been around the block as a follower of Jesus for a while, you've definitely experienced this. When you feel like your life is out of control, it might be because of some choices that you've made. It might be your own doing. It might be a sin that you continue to return to. And you don't want to. You really don't. You've prayed about it. You've told other people about it. You've studied it. You've tried to get release from this, but you continue to be drawn back to it. And it's just driving you crazy, and you feel like it is completely out of control. Maybe it's something done to you that's totally not your own doing. It could be a deep pain from your past. It could be some significant and unfair criticism at this time. It could be some serious financial hardship or relational strain. Whatever it is, we all experience this from time to time where we just feel like our life is out of control and we're in a free fall. It might be very private. Maybe nobody knows about it. You've kept it very much inside and no one here knows. Maybe you barely even admitted it to yourself. But if you're honest, you can sense this desperation, this trying to control things, to hold on, to somehow be your own savior in this situation that's so out of control. Or maybe it's public. Maybe people know all about this situation, but it still hasn't seemed to right itself. I'm sorry if you're in that spot. It's hard. I want to be clear about the metaphor, the language here. It's not that God put you there, by the way. This is one place where the word picture isn't perfect. But God is fully aware of and often allows these things in our lives because God understands in God's all-knowing providence that this can take you to a place of more full living, of more dependence, of a life of faith, not just belief. If you're in the free fall, then my encouragement to you is look to the side, because here's what happens. As the little baby is falling, the eaglet, mom goes into a dive bomb and plummets right past the baby. And I got to believe there's like this moment where the baby's like, I'm going to die. What was that? As mom goes bolting past. Baby is lighter and not very wind resistant. What am I trying to say? Aerodynamic, thank you. I'm a speaker. So the baby is just flopping through the air, not very aerodynamic. Seatbelt. And the mom, on the other hand, that was random, tucks her wings in, and she's heavier, and she's very aerodynamic, and so she slides right past the baby. And then she does something that is truly, truly amazing. This has been witnessed in real world, not just in metaphorical language. Maybe I'm not a speaker. This is what she does. This is amazing in the real world that God has invented mom eagles with the ability to do this. She, just at the right moment, opens up her wings, as the passage says, right below the baby and catches the baby on her pinions. She dive bombs past and catches the falling baby on her back. Wow. Baby's like, I think I'm dead. Wait, this isn't the ground. Those are feathers. Mom, I thought I was going to die for sure. Mom slowly and quietly starts to circle back up into the sky. Some of you in this room are in that spot right now, or you certainly know what it feels like to be caught by God, to be rescued, to be saved. And I'm not just talking about that moment of salvation when you went from lost to found. I'm talking about that moment often over and over in our life when God provides a rescue from our free falls. I need a rescue from God all the time. I need a rescue from God daily. And I certainly find myself seasonally in places of free fall where I cannot save myself and I need God's provision. And God swoops down and catches me in the person of Jesus Christ. Mom starts to circle back up into the sky very quietly, calmly. Little baby starts to catch its breath. Oh, that was horrible. Mom, wow, it really seemed like you dropped me, but I can't imagine that actually happened. Maybe I just dreamed it or something. Wow, it's so beautiful up here. Have you seen this before, Mom? Mom flies very high in the sky and then once again does another barrel roll. And baby starts to fall toward the earth again, and this process goes on for some time and repeats itself. Circling back up. Over and over again. And at some point, during one of the free falls, Mom yells out, "Open your wings, stupid!" And the little baby goes, "These things? Huh!" Now, if you've ever parachuted, as I have, or maybe you've seen a picture or video of a parachute opening, and it almost looks like the person reverses direction. You know what I'm talking about? It looks like they're falling, and then suddenly it looks like they can go, whoa, back up into the sky. You don't actually reverse direction, but you slow down so fast that it feels like reversing direction. And I have to tell you, when you do a tandem parachute jump, as I've done, You end up, because you only get about 15 minutes of training, it's not a big deal really, you don't have to learn that much, because you have an expert strapped to your back, some big hairy dude strapped onto your, it's kind of awkward. Hi, nice to meet you. Just hold on there, let's spend these few moments flying through space together. So we roll out of the plane, right, and we've got this harness on that's going between the two of us and right up through here. And boy, when you open that chute and you suddenly feels like you just stop. You just stop. I mean, it's so sudden. It really hurts. And you're kind of hanging there momentarily in the air, and then you realize, oh no, we're still falling. We're just doing so in a much more controlled way now. And that's very much what happens when the baby eaglet opens its wings for the first time. It opens its wings, and it kind of stops. And it's still falling. It's doing so in a controlled way now. It doesn't know how to fly still, but it's falling in a controlled manner. So baby eaglet opens its wings, and it starts gliding down toward the earth. It's probably still going to have a very rough, bumpy, possibly deadly landing. It's not a safe place still, but it's moving down and forward. Here's what mom does. Again, this has been observed in real world too, and it's absolutely fascinating. Mom swoops down again. Here's baby. Mom swoops down again, and she flies just below and in front of the baby. Right here, here's the mom. Now, you've probably somewhere back in school studied an airfoil, the shape of a bird wing or an airplane wing. Shaped round in the front, tailing off, curving off, flattening off, and tapering off in the back. And that shape, when moving quickly through the air, does a couple things. One is it provides lift because of the shape of the wing. It provides lift that brings a bird or an airplane into the air. It also provides turbulence that comes off, air turbulence that comes off the back of the wing. And so mom, flying just below and in front of the baby, has turbulence coming off the back of her wing that keeps the baby flying, coasting really, straight. Without mom there, baby would go down. But with mom here, the baby is just kind of hovering along straight. What a beautiful picture of our relationship with God. And maybe you're in this place right now where you're feeling anew. God has recently provided a rescue, and now I'm stretching my wings of faith, and I'm starting to step out, really putting belief to action, and I'm starting to really live into a new level of faith in my relationship with God and the world around me, and I'm doing it. I'm doing it, and we start to convince ourselves, I am capable. I can do this, and we forget to look and see that right out in front of us is God who's providing the lift. Eventually, mom peels away. Now, do you call them training wheels on a little kid's bike? What? Stabilizers? Wow. That sounds really formal. Little kids know how to say that word? Yeah. Stabilizers, okay. We call them training wheels. Maybe you remember back to your childhood when you had stabilizers on your bicycle. You do call them bicycles, right? No, I'm kidding. You had stabilizers, and then your mom or your dad or your aunt or your uncle or your neighbor or big brother, big sister, whoever it was, took them off, and it was time to learn to ride without them. And they ran behind you. Do you remember this? They ran behind you, holding onto you or to the back of the bike. This is hard, by the way, as a parent, and especially when you're out of shape like me. Okay. You're the kid on the bike. You might remember this. You're like, don't let go, don't let go, don't let go, right? And you're riding along, don't let go, don't let go. And at some point, you hear the adult who was holding you say, you've been on your own for 2 blocks, or something like that, right? And you look back, and you didn't even know they'd let go. And you're doing it. I'm riding without my stabilizers, right? That's exactly kind of what happens to the baby eaglet. It's flying along, mom's down here. Mom has this sense of when the baby is ready, and she peels away, and the baby is now, I would suggest to you the baby's now an eagle. I don't know that bird people would agree with me on this, but I think that it's at that point that it ceases being an eaglet and it becomes a full-fledged eagle without stabilizers. It's doing what it was invented to do. It's living as an eagle was designed to live. And maybe some of you are in that place right now too. You know, you don't think of like an eagle really living into its full eagleness, its full eagleosity, if it's just sitting in a nest all the time. At the San Diego Zoo, it's one of the best zoos in the world in my city, world-class zoo. And it's an amazing zoo, but there's one thing that makes me so sad every time I go there. And it's this eagle, this old eagle, really old. And he can't fly anymore. And I don't even know if he's physically capable of flying, but they have made it so he can't fly away at all. I think his wings are clipped, and he sits on a fake tree made of cement. It's kind of like supposed to look like a tree, but it's cement shaped like a tree. And this old eagle sits on a branch, and he's got a little chain from his ankle that holds him there in his spot. And I don't know, somehow, it doesn't feel like the rest of the zoo at all, which is a beautiful and wonderful place. And in this spot, it just feels like this old dude is just trapped and chained like a slave to this tree. It depresses me when I see it. And not only does it kind of depress me, but when I look at that old dude, I'm not even sure he's still there. I haven't been to our zoo in a few years. He's probably just hanging upside down now, swinging. We can't get rid of him. He's been part of the zoo for too long. But it not only does it kind of depress me, but I think to myself, he's not even an eagle anymore. He was, I'm sure, one of the most majestic birds ever created by God. And now he's just a shell of himself because he can't fly. And eagles were made to fly. You and I were made to be people of faith. It was God's dream for you from before the beginning of time that you would be a person of faith. Almost more than, I think this is theologically accurate, almost more than anything else. Certainly more than God dreaming of the impact that you will have in the lives of teenagers, or the great work that you will do in your YFC center, or how much you will read and study your Bible, or any of these other good and wonderful things. God's dream for you is that you would be a person of faith, that you would live a life of faith, soaring. It's what you were invented for. It's your design. And when Jesus promises us in John 10:10, I think my favorite verse, I mentioned it yesterday in my seminar because I love it for teenagers to understand the meaning of this. When Jesus promises, I've come to give you life and life to the full, not a wimpy, boring life, a life of meaning and purpose. That, my friends, is a life of faith. It's a life of soaring as an eagle, not holding back, not just holding on to our beliefs, but moving out in faith. Is there anybody here who, this is going to sound really random, is there anybody here who likes toast? Raise your hand if you like toast. Very good. The rest of you, how can you not like toast? Whatever. I really like toast. However, I was just in Detroit with my parents and my in-laws over the Christmas holidays, and I have to tell you, we might need to cut this part from the video. My mother-in-law's toast, I do not like. There is much I like about my mother-in-law, I do not like her toast, okay? Most of her, 99% of her, including what she bakes and cooks, is wonderful. Not so much with the toast. And here's the problem. The toast is made, in her little schema of things, a half hour or an hour before we eat. And then she kind of butters it for me. It's like pre-buttered. And the butter is put on at that time, but not all the way around, right? A good piece of buttered toast the butter has to be smoothly and evenly distributed all the way to the edges. But this has like a little round spot in the middle and not all the way out to the edges. And by the time we sit down to eat an otherwise glorious breakfast, the toast is cold and the butter spot has turned soggy. And so you pick up the toast by the edge and it flops down the side of your hand. You know what I'm talking about? Ugh, soggy toast. I am convinced that so many Christians, including, look, I'm not just talking about those people, I'm talking about us. So many of us, leaders, so many of us live soggy toast lives. And God wants you to have a crunchy toast life. Not a soggy, wimpy, flabby one, but the fullness of life that God has always dreamed you could have, invented you for. And listen to me, here's a little mini youth ministry application for us. You living into, submitting yourself to the process of God growing your faith is the best youth ministry you will ever do. Whatever your skill is, great or weak in any particular area. However good or weak or faulty or brilliant your thinking is. However good or not so amazing your programming is or your facilities or anything else that might lend itself to good or not so good youth ministry, the most important aspect of you as a great youth worker is becoming a person of faith. That's not just preparation for youth ministry, that is youth ministry. Here's what I want to do as we kind of bring our session to a close. I'd like to have a time of prayer, and I want to prayerfully reflect on this passage, this process. And so I'm gonna ask you to kind of chill out, get comfortable, close your eyes, and enter into a time of meditation, connection with Jesus. Open yourself up right now, intentionally make the conscious choice to invite God to speak to you. And I want to take you slowly through this process again, not as slowly as we just did, but I'm going to take you through it. And I'll pause at each one of these steps. Maybe you already know from our first pass through this exactly where you're at in this process right now. But if you're not clear on it, I want you to prayerfully enter into this time asking God to reveal that to you. And then I want to encourage you to, if you're willing, to ask God to move you forward in the process. It's not a one-time thing, by the way. Once you find yourself flying, you find yourself back in the nest, and then you're free-falling again, and then you're rescued again, and then you've got the, I forgot the word, training wheels, suspenders. No. What was it? Stabilizers. That was a great prayerful moment, wasn't it? Then the stabilizers are coming off again, and then you're trying out your wings of faith again, and it's a process that goes over and over again. So let's spend some time quietly reflecting. We've had some wonderful ministry times over these last 36 hours. I'd like this to be a quieter, more contemplative time right now. So just be quiet for a moment, and then I'm going to walk us through that process.